Doing Different with Kimmy is a podcast for women rediscovering their voice after 50. This podcast was born from my heart, created for women who are ready to reclaim their voice, rewrite their story, and rediscover the vibrant, powerful soul within them. If you're a woman over 50, navigating the shifting sands of midlife, empty nesting, or personal reinvention, this space was made for you. You are not alone. You are seen, you are heard, and you matter deeply. Why doing different? Because life after 50 isn't about fading into the background. It's about stepping into the spotlight of your own life. It's about doing things differently on your terms with your wisdom and with a whole lot of grace and grit. On this podcast, we explore midlife transitions, empty nesting, creative rebirth, spiritual and emotional growth, community and connection with real conversations with authors, podcasters, and everyday women who are doing different and loving it. And what you'll hear on each episode is a warm invitation to sit down with me, Kimmy, and dive into meaningful discussions. We talk about the things that matter, like identity, purpose, creativity, healing, and joy. We laugh, we reflect, and we honor the journey of becoming. You'll meet women who have reinvented themselves after divorce, retirement, loss, or burnout. You'll hear from those who found new passions, started businesses, or simply learned to love themselves more deeply. You belong here. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Karen DeBonis to the podcast. Karen is the author of the award-winning memoir, Growth, A Mother, Her Son, and the Brain Tumor They Survived, in which she courageously explores her journey as a mother, her struggle with a deeply ingrained need to please, and how those patterns affected her ability to advocate for her son during a life-changing medical crisis. Through her story, Karen brings to light important issues such as medical gaslighting, society's expectations of marriage and motherhood, and the unique challenges of parenting a child with neurodiversity. Karen's powerful essays have been featured in renowned publications, including the New York Times, HuffPost, Today, and Newsweek, among many others. She and her husband, celebrating 40 years together, enjoy their empty nest in upstate New York, cherishing their time together and their relationship with their adult sons. Please join me in welcoming Karen DeBonis, a writer, advocate, and insightful voice on family, resilience, and personal growth. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. And for those new to your work, could you briefly share what inspired you to write your memoir, Growth, A Mother, Her Son, and the Brain Tumor They Survived?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Kim. I'm glad to be here. The real motivation behind writing my memoir was that I wanted to share my experience because I believe that other women would see themselves in me and maybe learn from my story. And by the way, I'll take a moment and just apologize to your listeners for my voice. I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going
That's
to be a
okay.
little bit gruff here. But yeah, my story is really about me finding my voice as a mother and as a woman. My older son, Matt, was diagnosed with a brain tumor at age 11, and
Wow.
he's 39 this year. So I'm
Wow.
very, in the title I say the brain tumor we survive. So it's clear that it has at least a happier ending than some stories might. And
You
I
must have been so young when you had him. My goodness.
Oh, well, not that young really, but a lot younger than now. Um, but I think I have good lighting tonight, so that's what it is.
Well, I have some lighting going on there
Oh
too.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glowing over here. And
yeah.
being at night, it's so dark. We need that lighting.
Oh,
So,
oh yeah,
but
definitely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, that's
interrupt. You can go
okay.
ahead
That's
and
okay.
continue. He's
Um,
39. Wow.
he's 39, yep, and he's doing well. So the story, and I was going to say, and I think probably every mother will relate to if your child survives some crisis or some big thing, you survive it too as a mom because you're going through it with them. So that's why I really felt like this was a journey that he and I were both on. But the reason that I wanted to tell my story was not so much about what my son went through, but who I was as a mom when he was going through it. And
Yeah.
I've always been a people pleaser. I was raised by two wonderful parents, both of whom were people pleasers. And we kind of have this trope or um, this vision of a warrior mom. When your kid gets sick, you're gonna find out what's wrong and you're gonna make sure that the kid gets the best treatment and that type of thing. And that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I firmly believe, and I do give myself grace for having done the best that I could, but I truly believe that I was not the mother my son needed at the time. I did not know how to speak up to doctors. My husband, who's a great guy, we've been married 43 years now.
Wow.
He didn't see it. He didn't see what was going on. And in my book, there's a lot of reasons behind that, but I didn't know how to really be even firm with him about what I was feeling. I just had so much self-doubt. And, a couple years after, whether the kind of the crisis moment was over, or at least we thought it was over, I look back and I thought, actually, some friends, when they heard more of the story, they said to me, "Oh, you got to write a book." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not a writer, I've never had any inkling to be a writer, no desire to be a writer." But when I thought about it, I thought, I know other women and some men too are people pleasers. And I thought, if they read my story and see how crippling people pleasing can be, maybe they'll find a way out before they go through something that I went through where they just were not able to speak up for a loved one. So it was really,
Right.
wanting to prevent another potential tragedy is why I wrote it.
Right, right. And I know that I can relate to so much of what you're saying. But on the other hand, it got not serious, but it got so it happened often with my son. And I mean, we were in the hospital constantly, and it got to the point where the people pleasing part was um how do I explain it? It was I was so angry and I was so frustrated that I just blurted out. And
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on here? I need some answers and I can't
Hmm.
deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
So I totally get it.
Yeah.
But at one point I broke.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
broke.
Well, and thank goodness you did. And I think, and in many ways that was my situation too. It just, I think my story, I know just a little bit about your story, and mine was less serious in many ways. And so my son actually went undiagnosed for 3 years. And
Wow.
I was just the same thing. I got to the point that I just kind of broke and I started. But really, isn't that funny use of words? Because did we break or did we like flower,
Right,
Because,
right.
but I broke the chains of my people pleasing and I just started, gently in my own way, demanding some answers and refusing to listen to anyone who, didn't want to believe me. And that's when we finally, got our answer.
Yeah, I think that once we've had enough,
Yeah.
it's time to do something about it. And I know that it's difficult and I really can relate. And I wish that what I know today and the community support that I have today, I wish that I had had that when my son is 31, and
Mhm.
when we were going through this, and I so relate to you because it felt like it was just him and I.
Yeah.
I have my husband and I've been married 36 years, and he was there and he was supportive, but he is also a people pleaser. So
Oh no.
so
Wow.
it's like, he's trying to do please everybody, doesn't want to step on anybody's toes.
Yeah, yeah,
And it gets to the point where when it becomes critical, we need to ask questions and we need to
yeah,
speak up and we need to find our voice. And I'm so
absolutely.
glad that the both of us have. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what the most surprising, unexpected part of your journey um, as you were publishing your memoir.
Yeah.
What was something that was most surprising? Because I know you said you had no desire
Right.
whatsoever
Right.
to write anything.
Mhm.
So what was most surprising to you during that time?
Oh, to start, how long it would take and how much work it was. So I started writing around 1999 and I got my
Oh,
book published in 2023. So
oh
that's,
my.
yeah, 20 or let's see, over, like 25 years or so. Now, I didn't write that whole entire time. I took some
Right.
years off for different reasons, but when I did, for different reasons in 2016, I was ready to return to the book, and I didn't know anything about publishing. I didn't know anything about anything, and I just kind of learned as I went. I took classes and workshops as much as I could, and the whole publishing, not just the length of the journey and how hard it is to write a book, but um, all the intricacies of trying to find an agent and finding a press and um, building a social media presence, which I had no interest in having. And so just the complexity, I think, is really the biggest surprise for me.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that holds a lot of people back because so many times I've been told you need to write your story.
Mhm.
And and this was when the kids were a little younger, and I'd be, I don't have time for that. I don't know the first thing about it. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about it. I didn't go to college. I'm not a writer. Well, in 2020, during COVID, I went to college, and that was just 5 years ago.
Good for
And I
you.
learned how to write essays, and I took
Yeah.
Comp 1 and Comp 2 and absolutely fell in love with writing. So I'm praying and hoping that I will get my story out there
Yeah.
about my son because he still struggles today
Hmm.
because he has permanent disorders, multiple, as you know, we've talked about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us as moms I think it's therapy. Don't you think that it's a
Hmm.
little bit of therapy as well to get
Yeah.
that on paper and then to know that your readers are going to get help, that you're
Yeah.
going to reach
Yeah.
somebody out there that needs that help right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to the writing, I would say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Because like I said, I wasn't interested in being a writer, but I just had this story that I felt I needed to tell. And so just kind of like you, like I took a class and learned a little bit about this, and then I took another course and learned a little bit about that. And I found some critique partners and wrote essays and just, it's like going to college. You don't know it all at once. You learn a little bit, you try and you fail. I mean, I'm sure you've had, well, I don't want to assume, but I've had many, many essays rejected, before I
Yeah.
finally got published, and that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
it
just,
takes patience. You have
it
to have a
does,
lot of
yeah.
patience. So, how did your role as an advocate for your son evolve throughout his medical journey? How did your advocacy start to develop now that you were starting to open your eyes I mean, at what point did
Yeah.
you speak up? At what point?
Yeah, well, so it started in when he was 8. It started in the summer. And would you mind if I just read a paragraph from the
Oh,
beginning of my book because
absolutely.
it really describes it. So uh, Matt was a very, very bright child, very, very, very active. And so the first thing that happened, it was and this is the start of my book. I first noticed Matthew's eye rolling the summer he turned 8. It wasn't the typical, Mom, quit bugging me look. It was more like an ocular Ferris wheel, brown eyes circling around and around, taking in the view, enjoying the thrill, up, right, down, left, up, right, down, left, up, right, down, left, several times until it came to rest as if to take on new riders. Then the ride started up again.
Oh,
So he
wow.
had this weird eye rolling thing. And at the time I was in elementary school, counselor was not a clinical position. It was actually a little more education. I have a master's in health education. So, but that my title
Okay.
was counseling. So, but I had a lot of colleagues who were clinicians. And when I talked to them, they showed me books that said, it's a tick. And ticks are very normal in kids
Oh, okay.
between ages of 8 and 11, and they often outgrow it. So I thought, okay, so this is a little bit odd, but and I worked in an elementary school. So then my eyes were open and I looked around and I saw lots and lots of kids with tics that I had never noticed.
Oh,
So for the
wow.
first 2 years, that's kind of how it went, where he would develop a new symptom, like he was getting all kinds of tics then. He had lip pursing and hip rolling and wrist rolling and all kind of things. Um, and his grades were declining. He was just deteriorating in many ways, but it was always kind of within the realm of developmentally normal or typical. And so I would bring these attentions to our pediatrician or these situations to the pediatrician, and I would, bring them up to my husband. And my husband would say, "Oh, he's got to get more exercise. He's got to get more fresh air." And the pediatrician will say, "Oh, he's a growing boy. This is just, all boys do this." And so, there was that thing inside me that said something is wrong. But from my own experience, from my colleagues who I respect, to my husband who I love, to the pediatrician who I really liked, all the outside information was saying, it's okay, mom. Don't worry, mom. And then it was
Yeah.
around the third year so he was diagnosed at the beginning of sixth grade. So this would have been maybe like mid fifth grade, where, things just were, they were getting to the point that I thought, this is not, this is not how I want parenting to be, because I was so short of patience and frustrated and angry and sad. And my relationship with my son was not what I wanted it to be. So I took us to counseling. And I said to it's not like I was bringing my sick child to counseling. I was bringing me to counseling. I want to
Right.
be a better mom. This is not the relationship I want with my son. But of course, we also talked about the difficulties that Matt was having. So I think that was
And he was 8. He was 8 years old at that time.
by that point, he would have been 10. He would have been 10.
Okay.
So 2 years had gone by where he was just slowly, slowly deteriorating, but so slow that, his teachers didn't pick up on it and it was just easily excused. And then I think that was I had talked to my husband about counseling previously, and he was like, no, he was not into counseling. I was okay with counseling, but he was not. And we got to the
Right.
point that I said, I don't care what anybody says, we are going for counseling. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And as that year progressed, and I got to the point that I wondered if Matt was going to die. I
Oh,
was,
wow.
you know, and in fact, there's a scene in the book where he rolls over one day. I go to wake him up for school, and he rolls over and he says, "Mom, am I going to die?" And
And this was before you found out
this was
about the brain
before we found
tumor.
out. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was basically based on the ticks and all the different things that he was doing. And
Yeah. And
wow.
well, and I think at that point we had started, I finally wore down the pediatrician to the point that we got a referral. Our health insurance was an HMO plan at the time, which was kind of a fledgling thing. And
Mm,
we couldn't go outside of the practice. It's not like we could go to see a different pediatrician. But I
right.
finally wore her down. So she sent us to a specialist and then another specialist and another specialist. So I think, Matt was just taking all this in and surely, being worried. So
Yeah.
I think back to your question about kind of my development as an advocate for my son, I think it was really stilted for a couple years and then very slowly just, I kind of found my footing and found my voice and was finally able to say, something's wrong. We got to get this figured out.
And when he asked you that, Mom, am I going to die? What was your response to him?
My response was, "No, Matt, you're not going to die. We're going to find a doctor who's going to figure this out, and you're going to be just fine. So, silly goose, go get ready for school." And
Yeah.
yeah,
How did
I
you
don't.
keep pushing forward? I mean, did you have any doubts at all within yourself, about how you were going to handle this? How did you keep going?
I asked myself the same question. All I can say is, well, I was younger than I am now. Um,
Yeah.
I won't give away all the secrets of the book, but I will say that there was a time that I didn't know if I could go on.
Yeah.
Um, and then I realized I have to go on. Who's going to figure this out for Matthew if I'm not there? I'm the only
Yeah.
one that, like I'm the only one that can save him.
You're his
And
advocate.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And the school wasn't on board. There was no IEP that they
but
had provided, and the
no,
doctors were writing it off as just being normal. But
yeah,
both you and him, both of you knew that there was something wrong. Now he knew
yeah,
that there was something wrong and he could
yeah,
feel it too.
yeah.
And so the people pleasing situation, I don't know if you were still kind of just believing of what everybody else was saying. And so you didn't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. And so, how did you move beyond the people pleasing habits? Because I know we talked about, we just had enough and then we finally,
Hmm. Yeah,
spoke up, but in not in specific detail, you don't have to go
yeah,
into it unless you want to, but how did you move beyond that? Because
yeah.
that's a huge, huge hurdle
It is.
to get
Yeah,
over.
yeah. Well, I talk about this in my book. The kind of fairy tale version of this story and kind of a story that you often read is sick kid, people pleasing mom, or people pleasing mom. The kid gets sick, and the mom, finds her voice and figures things out, and
Yeah.
everybody lives happily ever after.
Yeah.
And and that wasn't my story. I so wish that was my story, but it wasn't. So
Yeah.
I think, you were asking about how did I make it through? And by the time he was diagnosed, and the prognosis was that he will bounce back.
Mm.
So I was so exhausted at that point, but I felt like we're going to get our life back. Like I'm going to get my Matt back, the Matt that I knew before all this happened. I'm going to get him back. Our life's going to go back to normal. I was kind of, even though I had been so exhausted, I was kind of energized by that. And and at that point, there was no need to advocate for him anymore. He was getting excellent care. He got the diagnosis that he needed. He did need surgery. The pediatrician, I think, was a little scared because, I had been complaining and she had been, gaslighting me. So she was
Right.
very attentive. We did go back to her. I talk about that in the book. But it really, I kind of went back underground for a long time. I went back to my old ways. It's like I didn't have it in me to make that huge change because I was still, as it turned out, Matt really didn't bounce back. He had a very, very long, slow recovery. So he took so much of my energy and
So
attention.
was the diagnosis the brain tumor at that
Yes.
time at 10 years
At,
old?
he was just turned 11 then. Yep. So it was
Okay, so was
brain.
that the explanation as to why all of these symptoms were occurring? Was that
Yes,
the reason why?
it explained everything. And the reason
Wow,
why is it was a benign tumor. So that
thank
sounds like it's not a
God.
big deal. But where it was in the brain for different reasons, it caused hydrocephalus and it had been going on for so long. When you look at the MRI, and I have pictures in my book, his brain is being squished into a sliver against his skull. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
every part of his functioning was being affected. So the brain tumor really explained everything. But
Oh my
again,
gosh.
we were told he would bounce back, but his situation, because it had gone on for so long, it was not typical. And so he didn't have the typical recovery.
So is this where, because I know that you mentioned in your bio about the medical gaslighting, which is
Yeah.
something that I can certainly
Mhm.
relate to, believe
Yeah.
me. Can you share an example of how medical gaslighting impacted you, your son, your husband, your entire family, and how you found the strength to persist through that? Can you give us a little example of what that looked like, this gaslighting that was going on?
Um, yeah. So for example, well, here's when I talked about things kind of getting bad for Matt, where I really knew something was wrong. He developed at age 10, he developed some daytime incontinence. So he would wet his pants during the day,
Okay.
which is not typical.
Yeah.
Um, nighttime, yes. Daytime, no. And so when I went to the pediatrician, what she said was, "Oh, all boys, they get distracted and they forget to go. That just happens to all boys." And so just very dismissive and very not really willing to step back and think, okay, this is not normal. And I think at that point, what she did was she was so tired of my complaining that she actually, and I go into this in the book, I won't go into details right now, but she was actually believing that it was me causing the problems.
Oh my
So,
goodness. And even though
yeah.
she knew that he had a brain tumor, she didn't suspect that perhaps this was also causing
Oh, no, I'm
that
sorry.
condition.
This was all before. So once he
Oh,
had an
okay.
MRI and diagnosed the brain tumor, then you know, then she was, any complaint I came to her with, she would get me if I wanted a referral, if I wanted a test, whatever, she would do it like stat because
Okay.
she realized that she had not been listening to me. So this is
And
all the medical gaslighting was all before he was diagnosed.
was that bedwetting or daytime
Incontinent.
incontinence, was
Mhm.
that also related to the
Yes.
brain tumor?
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. And that must have been
Yeah.
hard in school.
Well, fortunately, it didn't happen in school. It happened
Oh my gosh.
some other times. Yeah, thank goodness. He wasn't around his peers at the times that it happened. So,
After the diagnosis, were you able to get the school to do an IEP to
mhm.
accommodate him in certain areas of the class in the classroom?
Yep. Well, what happened was we did have him tested for special ed. And this was one of the anomalies kind of in his case and what made it difficult. He tested too high. He did not qualify, despite all his struggles in school. We ended up with a 504 plan.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a national thing. I don't think we're in New York State. I don't think that's a New York State thing, but it basically, essentially, it approved him for accommodations
Yeah.
in order to do well. So longer test times, extra set of books, keep one at
Yeah.
home because he was always forgetting his books and other things like that. And then he did end up he was in a private school at the time, but he did end up having different tutors, after school tutors, and that really helped a lot.
Yeah, and that is really, really important when you have a child that has disorders or disabilities
Yeah.
or
Hmm.
medical diagnosis. I mean, and it does take time to
Hmm.
get that in place. And then there are some teachers, especially when you enter into middle school and you're dealing with a lot of different classroom teachers.
Yep,
Some implement them to the T, some do not implement
that's
them.
right.
I've had that experience with my son. It was a nightmare, and changing school to school. It got to the point with me that with one of his disabilities with a hearing impairment, and they provided amplification before we were able to get hearing aids because
Mm.
financially we couldn't.
Yeah,
He just got to the point that he threw them away. And that was not our property. That was their property. And
yeah.
so we had to have a meeting about that. But that was one of the accommodations that the school provided was
Hmm.
amplification, where the teacher would have a microphone and the child has a headset. And so I
Yeah,
thought that was pretty nice. But
yeah,
boy, we sure did have to jump through hoops to get the IEP. And I don't know if you
yeah.
did with the 504, but it
Hmm.
takes some time to get that
It,
implemented.
it takes a lot. And you're right, same experience with us. Some teachers just, you know, they just didn't want to be bothered in middle school.
Exactly. So, what advice would you offer to other parents or caregivers who feel dismissed by these medical authorities? I mean, I know that that's happening a lot. I don't know
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have younger friends with younger
Hmm.
kids anymore. So I really don't know what's happening in the medical world right now. But I know that it happened a lot back in the 90s, and obviously it happened with you and your son. So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
advice can you give some of our young listeners today that have kids that are um possibly going through,
yeah, yeah,
the moms and the dads are going through the
yeah,
gaslighting? What would you
yeah,
suggest?
absolutely. Well, one thing is to use some specific language where if a doctor or a medical provider tries to tell you that this is normal, like developmentally normal, or this is typical or whatever, to come back and to say, this is not normal for my child and give some
Right.
examples. My child was able to do this, and now they are not able to do that. My child could accomplish this, and now they cannot accomplish that. So this is not normal for my child is really critical. Another thing, and
Right.
this was my own experience. My son, shortly before he was diagnosed, he happened to run into, so he was going into sixth grade, he ran into his former third grade teacher. They actually went on a little hike with some her sons and a couple other kids. And I heard through the grapevine later that the teacher was quote unquote horrified at his deterioration. And I
Oh my
took
gosh.
that comment to the one of the specialists we were seeing at the time, and that was what lit a fire under them. Not what the mom said, what a former teacher said. So one of my
Wow.
suggestions is to approach other adults in your child's life with an open mind, because it's not helpful if you say, "Oh, you know, my you see this, right? My son's having problems, right?" Just an open mind. Have you noticed anything different or unusual about my child? And then you can take that information and bring it to the doctor so it's not coming from you, it's coming from a teacher, a friend, a neighbor, whoever, someone at church.
Right, right. Like, sort of like a witness or
Yeah,
a,
yeah,
a backup. And
yeah.
the other thing is, would you suggest if it gets to the point where the pediatrician or their doctor is not listening and
Mhm.
is constantly fighting you on it, would you suggest looking for another doctor?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we really had our hands tied and weren't able to do that. But absolutely, seek a second opinion, switch doctors. You can go to the practice manager sometimes and kind of file a complaint. Um, but before you even get to that step, unless you really just have had it with the doctor, keep going back. If you come with a complaint and they're really not listening, and the stuff is still going on, go back 2 weeks later. Go back 2 weeks after that. I realize how difficult that is when parents have to take off work and arrange other childcare, and it's
Yeah.
not easy, but keep going back. And then absolutely, you know, leave. That's under your control.
Exactly. And as far as societal expectations go, I don't know if you had a circle of friends that had so-called normal children,
Mhm.
because, what is normal actually?
Right, right.
But that societal expectation can play a huge role in how we advocate for our children. Did you ever feel pressure to fit into a certain mold, to fit into your circle of friends? And if so, how did you navigate those expectations?
Yeah. And I would say I didn't have that expectation or that pressure from my friends, but it was within me. I was a little bit awkward as a kid, I guess. Like I never felt like I was never in the in crowd or anything like that. And now with my son, and this is gonna sound harsh, but I'll tell you in my book, I really go into this more, but it's also very, very honest. I'm very honest in my book. Um, I was the mother of the odd kid,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I did not know how to navigate that. And I knew that was my problem. It wasn't Matt's problem.
Right.
But I wanted so badly, I wanted him to fit in. I wanted him to
Yeah.
have friends. And, he was really ended up not having friends because
Hmm.
it's hard for a child who's different to make friends. And I
Yes.
wasn't much help for him. So, yeah,
And that's exactly what I went through as well. And the struggle was so difficult. And I was constantly chasing community groups for kids, or
yeah,
library time, library
mhm,
circles, or co-ops, or karate, or fencing, or t-ball, or whatever. And he never wanted that.
mhm,
He didn't want to fit in.
yeah,
And I wanted him to.
mhm,
And so I always wondered, why is he always quitting? Why is he always giving up? Why am I spending all this money on all these uniforms and all these classes just so
yeah,
that my child can be normal, so he
mhm,
can go on camping trips with, the Cub Scouts, or
yeah,
and I was constantly chasing normalcy.
mhm,
And so I can understand, and that was within me,
yeah,
and he was okay
mhm,
not fitting in
yeah,
when he was little. But when he
mhm,
got into higher grades, there was sometimes we homeschooled, and then because we
mhm,
had to, and then there were sometimes he'd go back to school. And then when the bullying started, that was when it got
yeah,
really sad. And I think it
yeah,
affected me more
mhm.
than it did him. And I don't know, did your son encounter any kind of bullying in school because of his issue?
Well, he was in a private school at the time, and there was this was after his diagnosis. It came to our attention that there was a little bit of that, and we spoke to it was a LaSalle school, so run by the LaSallian brothers. I think I'm saying that right. And one word from that brother, it never happened again. So I know
Oh,
that's not always the
wow.
case, in private schools or any place, but we were
Right.
fortunate that that was not really a problem.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome that he didn't have to go
Oh,
through that. So
yeah.
let's talk about neurodiversity for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
My son has it,
Mm-hmm.
your son has it, and I know that parenting a neurodivergent child is very challenging. And this term only came about in 97. Now,
Yeah.
at first, I wasn't told that he had it, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that the more I think about it, and the other day I said to my son, I said, "Y- aren't you neurodivergent?" I mean, I heard that somewhere along the line.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was Asperger's, but I heard that word, but I think I've ignored it all these years. I was telling my friend Karen that I think that that's what you've got, and he goes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, mom. I am neurodivergent. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, he goes, it's just that I think a different way. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, well, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And what Karen was explaining too.
Hmm.
And but I know that it only came about in 1997, and he would
Yeah.
have been 3, and I think your son would have been uh
11.
how old was he when he was diagnosed with
He
that?
was 11. Yeah, so
11.
90,
Okay.
yeah, 97.
Okay. So
Yeah.
was it definitely the brain tumor that caused that, or did he have that anyways?
Well, you know, the doctor said that in terms of the brain tumor, they said he actually could have had that at birth. It's one of these very, very slow growing tumors, and it's really hard to say. Because my son was so active, um, it's possible that that was ADHD, which is
Yeah.
considered, a neurodiverse, you know, brain, and so we don't really know for sure, but certainly the tumor and the hydrocephalus did, um, affect his cognitive abilities and just those executive functioning skills, they call them. So being
And does
organized.
that, oh, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead and
No, no,
continue. There was
just
a little lag there.
um, being organized, uh, t following directions, kind of taking in directions. Um, I'm missing a few, but yeah, they're
Does
called
that
executive.
still is that still happening today? Is that something that's still with him today?
Yes, he still has those struggles. And it's interesting that your son very clearly self-identifies as neurodivergent. My son
Yes.
self-identifies as having a brain injury. And they're
Oh.
really a lot the same. Um, but yeah, that and so I have adapted my language because I used to talk, and in the book I talk about kind of the villain is the brain tumor. And my son
Oh.
just does not see it that way. He speaks of himself as having a brain injury. So I have now kind of adopted my language. And if I talk about my son, and I don't talk a lot about his personal story now, it's his story to tell or not tell, but I'll mention brain injury because that's how he identifies.
Okay, right, right. And definitely he did have a brain injury because that
Absolutely.
tumor was pressing up
Yeah.
against his brain and everything.
Yeah.
And um, so what message, again, do you hope other parents of neurodiverse children take away from your story? There's so many out there, and like I said, it's a newer diagnosis.
Hmm.
And, back in the day, it would either be ADHD,
Hmm.
autism, Asperger's, autism spectrum level 2, level 1. I was searching for all these answers. And so what's your suggestion for if somebody out there right now is wondering, like
Hmm.
maybe their child has this,
Yeah.
what advice would you offer to them? How can they go about requesting the testing? Because
Yeah.
that's a difficult situation, especially if you're going to have a doctor that's going to dismiss you and say, like
Yeah.
what happened to you.
Yeah.
And so would you suggest that they bring them to a neurologist or a developmental, um, what do you call
I
those?
don't. Oh,
Can't remember what the doctor was called that diagnosed my son with Asperger's. And now I'm trying to think, and it wasn't done. He was 17.
wow. Wow.
So, yeah, and we were just grasping for straws, and
Hmm.
he was going to age out. He was
Hmm.
going to age out at the All Children's Hospital at 18,
Wow.
and so we were rushing like to find a
Yeah.
diagnosis, and I
Yeah.
don't remember. I guess she was a neurologist, I
Oh,
believe.
probably. Yeah. Pediatric neurologist, maybe. May,
Yeah.
may I ask what that neurologist diagnosed? Because I don't.
She diagnosed him with level 2 autism,
Okay.
very much on the line, hardly there. She said,
Uh,
He was when she would show him pictures of what the shapes were, he would
Mhm.
just give her like really weird answers, stuff like that. No
Mhm.
eye contact.
Mhm.
Um, so she said it was like a level two, more so Asperger's. And now, as we've gone through time, and Caleb has done a lot of research himself, he's a college graduate, he's independent, but he still has issues
Mhm.
and OCD and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But now this neurodivergent thing is sounding more so on the lines more so than Asperger's. And so I
Well,
don't know what the
yeah,
differences are really. I don't know much of the differences. Can you
yeah.
explain
Well,
if you
I'm not sure that I really understand either, but my understanding is that neurodiverse would not be, or neurodivergent would not be a diagnosis. It would
mm,
be kind of a maybe a consequence of how of something that causes the brain to function the way it does. But I think there are
oh,
people who consider themselves neurodiverse, even if they don't have another, like a specific diagnosis. So
okay.
when you think of, so neuro means, like neurons are essentially referring to not always the brain, but that
Right.
that system of communication within the body, and diverse means different. So
Thinking
I
differently.
think probably like um, autism, I imagine that there's a spectrum of
Yeah.
neurodiversity where, or like a bell curve where, a bunch of people probably operate at around the same, I don't want to say think the same, but their brain operates kind of in the same way. And then there are
Right.
people at the high end, probably like people who are in Mensa and geniuses,
Yeah.
whose brain works so much differently, but in a positive way. It's more like a computer. And then people on the lower end where their brain doesn't function as well. And I mean, I guess I hate to give advice, but I guess if I was thinking about it, I would say, you know, find um, look for the kind of the joys in wherever your child is on that spectrum or on that bell curve, and celebrate who they are. And
Yeah.
you never know what strengths lie in, what appear to be challenges, but you never know what strengths lie within that challenge, and also maybe next to the challenge and in addition to the challenge. So just believe that
Absolutely.
the strengths are there, and also know that you are not alone, even if you're going through it and you are alone because you don't have support at that time. And I think you and I both understand how isolating that can feel, and how
Yeah.
lonely and how hard. But just believe that there are people on this planet, there are other parents who are going through that same experience and have been through that same experience. And maybe they're not there by your side at that very moment, but they get you. They
Yes.
get
Yes.
you. So you are
Yes. And
not
I
alone.
and I think that it's easier to today to, back in the day for me in the 90s, it was, I didn't have podcasts to follow or
Hmm.
any communities to get involved, I mean, communities with autism, people
Hmm.
with autistic
Yeah.
issues. It was frowned upon, really. And it was, oh, that's the special kid. Oh, that's the kid
Yeah.
that's getting pulled out of the class. Oh, that's the kid that gets to sit in the front because
Hmm.
he's hearing impaired.
Yeah.
Or, so it was kind of like taboo back then.
Hmm.
So today it's so much easier. And I
Yeah.
encourage anybody that's listening right now that if you are suspecting that something is wrong, you have the outlets not only through pediatricians but neuro neurologists, pediatric neurology. Um, you can listen to podcasts about it, read books about it. You can get Karen's book.
Yeah.
There's so much at your fingertips that you can do now, or that you have access to now. And so I encourage you to do it. Just do your homework and try to get the most support that you can possibly get. And
Yeah.
Karen, I wanted to ask you too, looking back,
Mhm.
how has your family changed or grown from this experience? And how is your son doing today?
Matt is doing great, like your son. He lives on his own. He bought his own house a number of years ago. He's very industrious, and he putters around his house and does, odd jobs. And he has a longtime girlfriend, and he's just a he's the type of son that, he'll call in a snowstorm to make sure my husband and I got home okay. And,
Oh,
I mean, he's just,
that is so sweet. That's the
yeah,
way my son is too. And
yeah, it's just really a
my other
blessing.
child doesn't worry as much, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that some, our kids, all the, not one child is alike. And I think one is, in my family, one is more worried and
hmm
the other one is more relaxed. So,
yeah, yeah,
and he takes after me for that because that's the way I
mhm,
was with my parents too,
yeah,
always checking in. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's good to hear that Matt is doing
yeah,
very, very well and
yeah.
that his experience is positive today.
hmm
And my goodness, that's such good news. And what are the values and the strengths that have emerged as a result in you?
Um, well, I am much better about speaking up for myself. I'm a work in progress. I have
Hmm.
times that I fail. That's the word that I use, and times that I'm really proud of myself for speaking up. I'm a lot more. I think I've always been vulnerable, but I'm more open about my vulnerabilities, and that is a strength. And I never knew that. The more,
Yes.
in some ways, there's probably a limit, but when I am vulnerable about something that's a struggle or something that I'm dealing with, it people respond to that
Yeah.
because it shows your humanness, and that's so important, especially today. We're so disconnected, and so I have found a lot of strength in my own vulnerability.
Wow, that's beautiful. And we have to understand and be mindful as well as to our needs and our strengths
hmm
and our differences as well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
to appreciate and respect ourselves
Mhm.
as well. And how do you personally define resilience? Do you feel that you're resilient? Do you, after everything that you've been through, do you feel resilient now?
I don't think of myself as resilient, but I believe I am.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, I think for me, it's continually finding my purpose. Why am I here on this earth? Like, what am I meant to do with my time here? And to me, that's a type of resiliency because if things change, like my book, I truly felt, and I don't talk about my faith a lot, but I truly felt that this was my calling to put this book out there. And
Yes.
so
And
then I did that, and now I'm kind of like, okay, what do I do with myself? And I'm just I'm doing a lot of creative stuff right now. I'm not doing a lot of writing, but I'm sewing and doing projects and stuff.
yeah.
Um, and so I feel like but I'm still looking for my purpose, and I'm doing some volunteer work that I wasn't doing before. So I think that's a sign of resiliency, is you just keep searching for that purpose, um, and then you have to keep going because that's what
Yeah.
you're there for.
Yeah, and it's okay to talk about your faith as well
hmm
because I talk about mine all the time and I wouldn't be where I am today without God. And if and I'm not ashamed to say it because I find my strength in him, and I kind of still am searching for my purpose, but at the same
Mhm.
time I believe that my purpose, uh like Caleb was saying to me the other day, why did God let me be born if he knew
Mhm.
the struggle was going to be so hard? And I said, because trials and tribulations will come, and they are what make us strong. If
Yeah.
everything was handed to us on a silver platter, we would not develop character. Therefore, we would not develop hope. And so our purpose is to, like, for instance, for an example, right now, in this moment, it is ordained for us to be talking.
Yeah.
This is how I believe, and
Mhm.
that there is a purpose and for everybody, and it getting our voices out there to help other people. My question was always, why now?
Mhm.
Why now when the kids are grown and they're out of the house? Why now? And I
Yeah.
believe it's to get to the younger generation because
Mhm.
even though they have access to podcasts and all that stuff, and this is a
Right.
podcast, it's still encouraging to hear, somebody else's experience. And
Mhm.
so thank God that we do have outlets, that they do have outlets today, and
Yeah.
they have support. So I
Yeah.
think it's great. And I also think your purpose was to write your book and
Yeah.
to do
Absolutely.
your talks and your
Mhm.
speaking engagements
Yeah.
and all of that. And also finding new passions and new desires. And
Right.
this past year, I've quilted. I was never a
Mhm.
quilter. I discovered during 5 years of COVID, I'm a painter,
Oh, good for
um,
you.
podcaster, college
Yeah.
student,
Yeah.
essay writer. I mean, none of this would have happened
Mhm.
without the trials and the tribulations.
Yeah.
And so I've discovered a new side to me. And I think that's what everybody our age and
Mhm.
that goes through these times. I think there's another side of us that needs to be discovered where we
Yeah.
weren't
Yeah.
just moms. We
Right.
are, there is life after the empty
Mhm.
nest.
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so for listeners that are experiencing these struggles and that are going through a tough time, and maybe they have a couple of kids
Mhm.
that are neurodivergent or have autism or Asperger's, and they have a couple. They don't just have one, but they have a couple of them. And so, what's some encouragement and wisdom that you can share with them today as we close? And where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Um,
I know that
let's
we
okay.
you said a little bit earlier, you gave some advice, but I just
Mhm.
want to know um, what's a
Yeah.
one little line of wisdom that you could give.
Practice self-care.
Yes.
I did not do that enough. And, you're in it for the long haul. It's not a
Mm,
sprint, it's a marathon. So you got to take care of yourself.
yes.
Don't be afraid to ask for help and practice self-care.
Yes,
Um,
that's important.
yeah. And in terms of where to reach me, I have a website, which is www.karendebonis.com. It's just my name. Um, you can read a little bit more about my story there. You can see purchase links for my book. You can listen to a little, I think I have a clip of my audiobook on there, just a little clip. Um, I think I can't remember if I still have some people pleasing resources on there, but um, there's a lot about me there. And I'd love to have your listeners sign up for my newsletter. It's called
Yes.
Growth, Keep It Personal. And it's a lot about vulnerability and personal growth and people pleasing and motherhood. I am taking this little break now kind of from writing, but part of my newsletter is what I call low stakes creating. So it's just
Oh,
creating where mistakes don't matter. And it's just so fun. And it's not a tutorial at all, but I just share some of the crazy things I try and the fun things. And I'm having a blast.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That sounds really good. And I'm definitely going to look into
Oh,
that
good.
and
Good.
check it out as well. And Karen, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties
Oh,
on
that's
your
all right.
end. We'll try to get that cleared up somehow. And I just want to thank you. And it was such a pleasure speaking with you. And I hope that our listeners today have been encouraged by your story, and that if you want to subscribe and you want to follow Karen, please look down below. I'm going to include the links that she just gave us, and my email and my resources as well will be included in the description of the podcast below. And remember, if you are a woman over the age of 50 doing different and you have a story to share, I would love to have a conversation with you on my podcast, because you never, ever know how far of an impact your story will have on a listener. And so again, Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to Karen's story today. And until next time, keep doing different.